Welcome to Global Reality. Let's get started. Well, if the recent controversy on the BBC documentary has piqued your interest, here's an attempt to look into their motives behind it. The British inquiry of 2002 riots in Gujarat has only as much credibility as their reports of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Why am I saying this? What was the point or the intention on raking up an issue almost 2 decades old, harping on the same old allegations which have been long settled by India's Supreme Court? While the BBC has not always been a reliable source of news, it has hit the lowest of the low of journalism and has attempted to scavenge on long redundant issues for sensationalism. It has been 2 decades since the riots, 12 years since Shri Narendra Modi ji subjected himself to marathon questioning by the SIT, 10 years since given a clean cheat by the SIT, and almost 7 months since the Supreme Court of India declared him innocent. The man has been hounded despite all his attempts to come clean of allegations.
2002 के दंगों की बात आती है और हमेशा आपसे ये अपेक्षा होती है और आप इसका कई बार सैकड़ों बार जवाब दे चुके हैं कि मैं उसके बारे में उस वक्त बोल चुका हूं जो मुझे बोलना है 2002 में।
सब कुछ बोलता हूं, ऐसा नहीं झूठ बोल रहे हैं आप, मेहरबानी कीजिए, ये भाषा ठीक नहीं आपकी। मैं 2007 तक हर व्यक्ति को हर सवाल का हर समय जवाब दिया है। प्रिंट मीडिया में पढ़ा है, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया पढ़ा है। आप लोग इसको रिसर्च कीजिए, आपको बुरा लगे भला लगे और आप चाहो कि मैं आपसे दब जाऊं तो होने वाला नहीं है। आप चाहो मुझे नोच लो, नहीं कर पाओगे, नहीं कर पाओगे। हाँ, 2007 में जब दोबारा यूपीए बना और उन्होंने षड्यंत्र करके कोर्ट कचहरियों में सुप्रीम कोर्ट तक मुझे घसीट के, फिर मुझे लगा कि अब मुझे कुछ नहीं बोलना चाहिए क्योंकि सुप्रीम कोर्ट को इन्फ्लुएंस नहीं होना चाहिए, सुप्रीम कोर्ट को स्वतंत्र करना चाहिए। आज तक हिंदुस्तान के किसी मुख्यमंत्री को 9 घंटे किसी पुलिस वाले ने ग्रिल किया है? ये मुख्यमंत्री है जिसको 9 घंटे तक पुलिस अफसरों ने ग्रिल किया था, सुप्रीम कोर्ट के कहने पर किया था और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने उसको वीडियो रिकॉर्डिंग करके देखा था। ये सब कसौटियों से निकला हूं और आगे भी हर कसौटी के लिए तैयार हूं।
The timing of the documentary too, given that the General Assembly elections are round the corner, raises many compelling questions. One of it being the BBC confirming that it had these reports since several years but did not fully cover it then. So why now? Has it discovered something new? No, it has only documented what has been in public domain for the last 20 years. It is essentially still latching on the old colonial mindset and believing it is still above our Supreme Courts. Britain has been doing this since ages. At the start of the Iraq War, British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw played a key role in the decision to go to war with Iraq. He successfully peddled the weapons of mass destruction theory, which ultimately leads to Iraq's destruction. It is the same Jack Straw who featured in the BBC documentary on Gujarat riots, claiming a UK team had visited Gujarat to investigate the riots. It has once again deployed the same time-tested strategy of peddling hoaxes to bring down nations or governments which do not serve its interest. There is an inherent sense of British superiority which resulted in the exploitation, suffering, ruination of tens of countries till date. Let us take a look at some British atrocities around the world. The British Empire in its prime governed a massive fifth of the world's population and a quarter of the world's land area. Almost all parts of the world that the British controlled faced massacres, famines, concentration camps, and unimaginable human atrocities. The Boer concentration camp, which saw the capturing of around the sixth of Boer population, detained in camps in overwhelmingly inhuman conditions, overcrowded and prone to outbreaks of diseases, with very scant food resources, resulting in the death of almost 30,000 Boers. The Mau Mau uprising from 1951 to 1960, when thousands of elderly Kenyans were mistreated, raped, and tortured by the British colonial forces. Though there are no documented figures of this genocide, but estimates range from 20,000 to almost 1 lakh dead. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The horrors of the Jallianwala Bagh still haunt the Indian consciousness. When peaceful protesters locked inside the walled Jallianwala Bagh with no route to escape were fired upon by the British soldiers until they ran out of ammunition, killing more than 1,000 protesters and as many injured within a span of only 10 minutes. Though British Prime Minister Theresa May had expressed deep regret for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, it was clearly just a regret and not an absolute apology. This makes it hard to believe that the British will ever regret their actions. Bengal famine in India. In 1943, about 4 million Bengalis were deliberately starved to death when Winston Churchill diverted food grains from India to Britain and other countries, while a deadly famine swept through Bengal. The Bengal famine stands even today as one of the most horrific atrocities on humanity to have occurred under the British rule. Millions died of starvation and malnutrition, and millions more pushed into crushing poverty. People starved and lay dead on streets as diseases like cholera, malaria, smallpox, and dysentery devastated their starved bodies. Around 90% of farmers' produce were taken away as taxes, and those unable to pay the British were punished with lashes having iron nails attached to them. Their women were abducted, raped, and paraded naked on streets. Thousands of women were thrown in sexual slavery. There are accounts of the British setting up prostitution centers, first in Kolkata, followed by all other major cities in India, which were frequently visited only by British officers and soldiers. History is replete with horrendous stories of most brutal atrocities, not only in India but all over the world, and the British has the gall to question India on human rights. The British, even today, glorify its act of colonizing 25% of the world's land. Children in British schools are taught how the clever Brits arrived in chaotic foreign lands and bestowed them with world-class structures, roads, railways, and a dignified standard of living, when all it was doing was draining its colonies of all its wealth and resources. Come to think of it, at the beginning of 18th century, India's share of the world economy was 23%, almost as much as all of Europe's put together. But by the time the British left India, it had dropped to less than 4%. Ironically, this had been reported by the BBC itself. And if you believe that Britain's hypocrisy ended with its colonial rule, it only recently showcased its rank hypocrisy after it announced that it would host a summit to discuss international support for an investigation into alleged war crimes in Ukraine. British Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab said, "Russian forces should know they cannot act with impunity, and we will back Ukraine until justice is served." Now it's rich coming from Britain. In another case, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak outlined the urgency for world leaders to address the impact of climate change. He said that climate and energy security go hand in hand during the COP27 summit. He also said that Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change, but are a reason to act faster. And just 20 days after the UK Prime Minister's comment, the United Kingdom doubled its coal imports. And while it continuously pressured India to sanction Russia, Britain was among those European countries which made some exceptions which only served its own interests. And while we are at it, another hypocritical move by Britain on Russia-Ukraine war was after Britain's failed attempts to pressure India to not purchase Russian oil. Britain itself is importing Russian oil via India. As legally, according to British rules, an imported barrel is deemed to have come from the last country where substantial processing took place. This means that crude oil from Russia that is refined into diesel elsewhere, such as in India, can be legitimately be imported into the UK. Coming back to the current controversy on the BBC documentary on Gujarat riots, it is clearly an attempt to undermine and malign Prime Minister Modi, undisputably one of India's most popular leaders. It is not only ironical but pure hubris on the part of the British to preach India or any other country for that matter on human rights. As for the 2024 elections, BBC has only ensured a magnificent win for the ruling party. Thank you for watching. Do like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel if you like our content.